Ready to experience the next generation of precision agriculture? Discover innovative ways to save on labor, cut chemical use, and boost your yields. Visit Eco-Robotics at the World Ag Expo, February 11th through 13th. A World Ag Expo 2025 Top 10 Products winner, Eco-Robotics is transforming agriculture with the ARA Ultra High Precision Sprayer. Powered by advanced AI, ARA's plant-by-plant technology targets individual plants with incredible accuracy, slashing chemical use by up to 95% and maximizing productivity. Come meet the team, see the ARA sprayer up close, and learn how Eco-Robotics can help you save time and money while increasing your yields. The future of farming is here. Don't miss it. Visit booth S54 at the World Ag Expo or learn more at ecorobotics.com/top 10. That's ECOROBOTIX.com/top 10. Hi, and welcome to North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. Our returning guest today is a leader in agricultural banking with over 40 years of experience, from teaching ag finance and accounting to holding executive roles at Farmer Mac and Bank of the West. His expertise has really shaped the entire ag lending industry. Currently, he serves as the Senior Director of Institution Credit at AgAmerica, America's largest non-bank ag lender. And today we're going to dive into AgAmerica's 2025 economic outlook for U.S. agriculture. And this report offers a deep dive into critical shifts in farm income, input costs, debt levels, and federal policies as well, all aimed at helping America's farmers, ranchers, and landowners prepare for the future. So joining me today from Lakeland, Florida, please welcome Curt Covington. Welcome, Curt.
Hi, Chrissy.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show again.
Thank you.
So for those new to the show, can you share a bit about your background and what brought you to your current role at AgAmerica?
Sure. Actually, I'm out in California right now. I'm with a number of growers that are kind of caught up in these wildfires. So I grew up in farming in California. Still, not to the extent that my family used to farm, but we still farm out here in California. I do live in Lakeland, Florida now. I grew up as an ag banker starting in 1979. So I'm actually getting closer to 50 years of ag banking.
Wow.
And started out in California in ag banking, moved through the Midwest, ended up in Washington, D.C., as you had so accurately pointed out, as Chief Credit Officer at Farmer Mac, and then came down to actually spend a few days in retirement because it was time, and then I realized that was probably a bad decision. So went back to work, and I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah, that's great. And so what does AgAmerica focus on? And then how does it really stand out in agriculture lending?
Yeah, so AgAmerica is what we would define as a non-traditional real estate mortgage originator. We originate loans both from a conventional standpoint and non-conventional ones where we work with a number of borrowers who may be having some financial distress. And our goal with those clients is to what we would define as work them up to get them to the point where they're back on their feet, where they have positive cash flow, have the ability to service their debt, and find themselves in a position that they can be back and productive out in the field instead of having to worry necessarily about where their financing is going to come from. So we've been a good partner both to farmers that are seeing success, and we, as you well know, Chrissy, there are farmers that are not having success right now from a financial standpoint. So we work with both of them. We're proud to do so.
Yeah, that's really important. So let's jump into the report. What inspired AgAmerica to create this resource, and then who is it primarily aimed at?
Yeah, Chrissy, there's a lot of these resources out there, and it's interesting because going from one spectrum to the other, a lot of those resources may not have people that have boots on the ground that are actually seeing what's going on in the world of agriculture and in the world of agricultural finance. And so whilst a lot of reports that you see out there may talk about the economic implications of this and the policy of that, our report is really more based on what we're seeing from our growers and from the markets that we serve, which we'd like to say it's all 50 states, but I'm trying to remember if we've ever done anything in Alaska, but for sure, 49 states.
Yeah, that's good. So the report highlights a decline in net farm income with a projected recovery for 2026. So, what are the main factors that are driving these trends?
Well, we came off a period of time when farm revenue was pretty good across all sectors. And input costs prior to, say, 2022, as far back as 2021, input costs were moderate, fairly moderate. There was some increase in some of those costs, but starting in 2020 through all the way up through 2024, and even today, input costs have been elevated. And some of those costs we're starting to see moderate to some extent. Oil-based input costs, so fertilizer and chemical is the ones we usually talk about. But there are other ones that are not going to moderate anytime soon and probably will remain elevated. One being seed cost, which continues to be expensive for many, many growers. Labor cost. So labor costs, and it depends on the part of the country you're in. Out here in California, you're paying somebody $25 an hour to get a job done that 10 years ago you were paying probably $15 an hour. And I'm talking about the full cost of that labor. So those costs have increased 50%. Across the Midwest, you're also seeing an increase in labor costs. Most importantly, the one we really don't talk about is interest costs. And you say, well, Curt, is that really an input? Well, my answer is I know very few farmers that can finance their way through over their career or over their family's generational existence in farming that hasn't relied on debt in some form or fashion, whether it's real estate or operating debt. But operating debt, the cost of operating debt is tripled in its cost since 2022. Now we're starting to see some possible rate reductions, although more currently, we've seen that inflation is still stubborn, and now there's thoughts that the Fed may not be reducing rates in the near future. So interest cost is the one that we really don't talk about. And honestly, it's out of control of a lot of people, both the farmer and, quite honestly, the banker.
Yeah, makes sense. Great points. And you touched on input costs, and stabilizing input costs are a focal point. So can you expand on how these lower feed and fertilizer costs are balancing against the persistent labor challenges?
Yeah, so I think part of this is farmers today are having to decide between needs and wants when it comes to some of their input costs, because they're dealing with revenues, and whether it's corn and soybeans or almonds and table grapes, it really doesn't make any difference. None of those commodities have had a very good year from the revenue side, and projected through 2025, with few exceptions, I think the revenue is still going to be challenged. And Chrissy, you and I both know, and it's a very common thing that we talk about in agriculture and agricultural finance, is that farmers can't control their revenue. They have no way of controlling the price of their commodity. They can hedge it. They can somehow attempt to lock that or contract it. But the reality of the matter is the price that's offered is the price that's offered. So how does a farmer ensure that they improve their profitability? It's through cost control. And so it's not just deciding what costs that you're going to have to, take extra effort in controlling, but what would that impact be potentially on production and the quality of your crop? And so today, when we talk to farmers, the biggest issue for many of them is, how do I get a highly productive crop, high quality crop, yet at the same time find ways to control the cost? And part of that is, and it really comes down to this, is the farmer has to be very, very, very diligent in dealing with their suppliers. They have to
Right.
push the pencil. Well, what we used to call push the pencil, now it's work the Excel spreadsheet to decide what costs can I control. And that's the big thing is a lot of people say, well, where do I start if I'm a farmer? Where do I start? Do I go to my banker and say, hey, drop my interest rate 1 full percentage point? Highly unlikely. Do I go to my landlord and say, hey, you got to drop my rent by 50%? Probably not going to work. What you got to do is figure out those costs that you have control over, and those are typically your input costs, and decide how can I best manage those to improve my profitability. And then lastly, and I hate to pontificate here, but when we talk about separating needs from wants, Chrissy, it's really more about what capital expenditures are necessary for this operation to continue successfully, and which ones are more wants than actual needs.
Right. That totally makes sense. Yeah. And you talked about the debt levels are
Mhm.
concerning. And what advice do you have to producers um, to when they're managing operating loans, even variable rate debt? How can they do that more effectively or smarter, as well as reducing those costs?
Okay, here's an old time saying, and I'm an old timer.
Mhm.
Um, Assets are bought during good times and they're paid for during bad times. Remember that. So these people that bought, farmers that bought equipment 2 years ago during the good times, or 3 years they're still making payments on that equipment for another 4 years. Debt and interest costs don't go away. Debt doesn't care what the revenue numbers are. They don't care how bad the economy is. Debt has to get paid. It has to get fed. The second piece of this is, you know, um, and I encourage people to think about this because I continue to hear across the board, and again, maybe this is more academic than it is actual, where the debt levels in the United States, whether it be farm real estate or operating debt, is still manageable. I tend to disagree with that. I think in the last 10 years, and I could be wrong about this, but farm real estate debt alone, I think, is probably increased, oh, at least 20-30%. And the revenues haven't supported that increase in that kind of debt. Operating debt, as
Yeah.
you can see, is climbing quickly now. It's climbing very quickly across the United States. Why is that? Because farmers have run out of liquidity. They've run out, they don't have any working capital, so they're having to lean on their lenders. Their lenders obviously are a bit skeptical of where the economy is headed into 2025. So it's this decision about, if I'm going to take on debt, I've got to remember that I have to service that debt and I have to keep my lender happy and informed.
Yeah, that's good. And to say the least, we live in politically interesting times. And
Yes.
I talk about this all the time. Policy. There's the three things that affect the farm every single day, and that's policy and finances and God, right? There's those things that they
Right.
can't really control, but that need to
Right.
um, they need to pay attention to, and
Sure.
policy is policy uncertainty is a significant theme. So, how are changes in federal support, trade relations, and environmental regulations impacting U.S. agriculture? And what are you seeing with the new administration? I know there's a lot there.
Yes. So I'm a follower of environmental practices and environmental legislation when it comes to agriculture, and so my views may not be shared with a lot of people that might be listening to this. I believe that environmental policy has taken the place of rational thinking, particularly out in the Western United States where water is everything. We live in a desert out west. This isn't a political football. If you want your food, you got to find the sources of water. You can't
Right.
be preserving that water necessarily for every environmental cause you can possibly think of. So, while again, some people may listen to this and not be happy about what I'm saying, there has to be some balance and there has to be some rational thinking about environmental policy. I think obviously this administration has indicated that some of the things that you'll see from an environmental perspective and conservation there has to be balance. No one has said we have to just throw it out the baby with the bathwater. No one has said that, but there has to be some degree of balance because the cost of servicing environmental causes at the farm gate, there is no return on that to the farmer. It's just a cost you have to bear. And many of these farmers live with the regulatory environment, but they live in that regulatory environment because what are you going to do? Take your farm and go somewhere else? You're not. You're stuck where you're at. When it comes to, yeah, when it comes to farm policy, I guess we've continued to kick this can as usual. The farm bill is going to get kicked down the road until sometime into 2025, I suspect. Yeah. There are a lot of things within the farm bill, reference prices and things of that nature for, corn and soybeans that have to be adjusted. It has to be brought into the modern world. Look, in the last 3 years, the landscape of agriculture, particularly agricultural finance, and I'm saying the cost of farming, has changed dramatically. And there has to be some considerations for that. Also, the crop insurance programs, which, I was talking to a farmer last night and I said to him, the crop insurance program, probably about every program that's ever been thought of by the U.S. government, is one of the few that actually works, and it works pretty well. And it's, for the most part, solvent most of the time. It's a shared risk arrangement, and it needs to stay that way. It's not the job of the government to get the taxpayers to pay for every farmer's cost. On the other hand, if you want high quality food at a relatively inexpensive price compared to the rest of the world, you have to live with the idea that the crop insurance program is a key and foundational piece to bringing high quality food to market.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Attention farmers and ag professionals in the Northeast. Mark your calendars. The New York Farm Show is back. The New York State Fairgrounds in Syracuse, February 20th through 22nd, 2025. Experience over 400 exhibitors showcasing cutting-edge solutions for beef, dairy, crop management, and more. This year's show features new products like advanced harvest tracking tools, compact tractors, and cattle health innovations. Don't miss the refreshed forestry seminars. Learn about carbon programs and silvopasturing, plus get tips from consulting foresters to maximize your land's potential. Admission is just $5 for adults, and kids under 18 are free. Show hours are 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily. Join us this February in Syracuse. Learn more at newyorkfarmshow.com. Yeah, for sure. That, feeding America, the risk can't just be on the farmer as well.
Right.
And you brought up some really great points there, especially in navigating common sense. I hope that there will be a bit of a return. The last few years going to DC and sitting in on, USDA and EPA meetings, the lack of common sense was just so obvious. And I really look forward to, hopefully some of these appointees are actually from a farming background that know what's going on. So I too am really hoping for some common sense changes.
And I think some of this, look, I get it. And there's a number of arguments around the farm bill, right? 75 to 80% of it really is focused on the SNAP program, right, and nutrition programs. Totally understand it, totally support it. Some people think that there should be a greater amount of the farm bill that should be allocated to conservation. What they don't realize, that remaining 15% that goes to farmers, half of that is already for conservation. And so people don't realize the farmer's really only seeing about 7% of that of general agricultural policy. And so you do get some across the aisle consensus around a farm bill, but it's going to be $1 trillion farm. It's going to be a very expensive farm bill next time around when this does come up.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk back and forth, in this community of separating SNAP out of farm bill, and I can see both sides. Like, it sounds like a good idea, but then having it in, that's really the only way it gets brought out into the spotlight. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there has been talk about that. Should it be moved under housing and urban development? Should it be
Yeah.
moved into finance? Should it be moved under its own title? Should it be moved somewhere else? The reality of the matter is, again, this is probably one of the few bills where you're going to get consensus. Can you imagine if the SNAP program were being dealt with in a highly partisan environment when you're talking
That's
about
true.
housing and urban development, or if it's in the finance department? Your policy would look like, the stock market. You'd have these periods of time when you'd have plenty of support for SNAP. You'd have these times where there would be depleted sources for SNAP. And no one, including me, is suggesting that we need, to somehow adjust SNAP such that there has to be some draconian view of how that should be. There does need to be some level of consistency, and we do need to serve the underprivileged when it comes to that. And so for me, I've struggled with this, Christy. It's like maybe it is in the right place. It is tied to agricultural production, I suppose. But Christy, where are you going to put it?
Right. Yeah.
Where do you put it?
And you're right about it becoming more politicized if it goes somewhere else. So,
Yep.
yeah, that it's just a quandary, I think, for sure. And I that's kind of another thing that always bothers me is, it's everybody talks about reaching the consumer from our industry, but that's very hard. And, algorithms don't serve us either, on social media very well. Um, but it would be great to get the population to understand that, saying no to all chemicals is not an option, right? Like
Right.
it's
Well, that's a
I know
deep misunderstanding. That's a deep, deep
yeah,
misunderstanding about biochemicals versus, some people harken back to the world of DDT when it really
right.
was it was a chemical. Today, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there are a lot of chemicals that
Oh,
get
okay.
sprayed that you have a reentry in 24 or 48 hours. That's how safe they are. There is a
Yeah.
very thin line between organic, natural, and conventional farming today, and it's going to become narrower and narrower. And I honestly kind of think the day will come when conventional farming will be seen as suitable, even for those who somehow think that conventional farming is bad today.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So the report also outlines strategies for leveraging government programs. So what are some practical examples for growers to stay financially resilient through this year where their income may not be coming back?
Yeah. Wow. Um, who knows what what government policy might look like in 2025 or 2026.
In a month,
2020,
even.
yeah, 20, yeah, sorry, I'm in 2025, but honestly, we are in a
Yeah.
transition. 2025 is not going to be a great year for agriculture. So this really, to me, is not about what can they leverage outside of their outside of their farming enterprise, but what can they leverage inside their farming enterprise? And I'll be brutally honest. It always gets me in trouble, but I guess that's
Mhm.
what life is all about. Is that when times are good, farmers tend to find a way to um, enhance their living style and their lifestyle and their living expense. It's time for many of these farmers who have a lifestyle and a living expense that is not supported by their farming operation to find a way to whittle that down. And that's easier said than done. Someone says, well, you just don't take as much money out of the business. Well, let me remind those people that are saying that is a lot of money that was taken out of the business during the good times sits in a vacation home in Arizona.
Right.
It sits in other investments they may have made that they still have to feed, whatever those investments might be. And so it's not an easy thing to do. Reducing your lifestyle at this point in time, which is going to be a necessary thing in 2025 into 2026, is not going to be easy. A lot of farming operations, there's still a lot of pigs feeding at the trough. A lot of people involved in the family operation that probably there needs to be a long and hard discussion about who really wants to be here and who really needs to be here. And that's number one. The other thing that I would say, you definitely need to leverage out if you're going to leverage outside sources, people that can give you great advice around cost management, about how to properly organize your books, how to properly organize your business. One of the things that I'm a big fan of, and I'll just finish this by saying, sometimes businesses, these farming operations, need outside advisors sitting around the family room table and having a blunt discussion about how they run their business, but how they see successful businesses outside of farming running their businesses. And it's a great tool, an excellent tool. And I do that in a number of situations, and it works.
Yeah, those are some excellent points, but not only for farms, but also for any agribusiness, for any business, and then for families as well. There's a lot of expenses that you can get rid of, and prepare for this coming year ahead before the floodgates open up again.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And really, honestly, to the end of that also is, and I talked about this a couple minutes ago, is deciding what you really need to replace. It's the need versus want. If it's capital improvements, do I really need a new pickup, or do I just really want a new pickup? Do I need a brand new tractor, or do I need just a 2-year-old tractor, or do I run with the one that's 7 years old? Well, those kind of decisions shouldn't get made just by saying, well, I've always bought a new tractor after 3 years, so I'm going to continue to buy it. It's always worked for me. Well, maybe it's time to think twice about that, because you have to decide whether the repair and maintenance cost is cheaper than the cost of debt. And the cost of debt today still remains very high.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So where can listeners access the report, and then how do they reach out to you or AgAmerica for more information?
Sure. www.agamericalending.com. I'm reachable via our website. They can, people know how to somehow people find ways to find me. I'm available through our resources. They can call us and they can reach out to me, and I will return their call.
Mm-hmm. And you also speak. I've seen you at a few different events this year or this past year. So if anybody's looking for a speaker, you're a great, insightful speaker.
Yeah, I told someone asked me, what do you charge? I said, well, I believe in free speech, so I do them for free.
That's the theme of 2025, free speech, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're gonna be booked all year now.
Exactly.
After saying that.
Exactly. I think it's important. Look, you know what? These people go to conferences, they expect to hear something insightful from somebody, that comes from a different viewpoint. I just happen to be lucky. I grew up in farming. I know farming. I know a little bit about ag lending, and I also have seen good deals gone bad. I've seen good practices in businesses that work, and I've seen bad practices in businesses that don't work. So you kind of share those things, and then you hope that some of it sticks. It's the old 10% rule. You hopefully out of that 100% of that hour of speaking, they picked up 10, maybe 10 minutes worth of useful information.
Yeah, for sure. And I can speak for myself, but I'm sure you probably can relate, living in Florida, but then also doing a lot of business in California.
Yeah.
And you can really see how, agriculture is different.
Oh,
no
totally.
place is perfect, but you can see how policy, rules, leadership really does affect the farm. Producers are pretty much alike in mindset, alike in, it's the structure around them that really affects their success, right?
That's correct. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Which battle do you have to pick and choose, and what you're going, you raise such a great point, because in California, if you're going to try and fight the legislative battle, my general response to that is good luck.
Right.
In any other state fighting that, you said something, and I know this probably goes off topic, but it's so interesting. How do you get a unified voice in agriculture so that consumers understand that we're not bad stewards of our assets, like some people would want to tell you, that we ship 80% of our water in California gets shipped overseas because we use that water to grow crops that we sell to consumers outside of the United States. A lot of that is just misinformation, but here's the problem, and you know this better than anybody. Agriculture is the only sector in business that I know of that has so many special interest groups, so many trade groups, so many commodity trade groups that I mean, if you went into the retail business world, you have, the Retail Business Association, and they represent everybody in retail. In agriculture, you've got the cotton interest, you got the corn interest, you got the soybean interest, you got the almond interest, you got the dairy interest, you got this, and they all are seeking a piece of the pie. The reality of the matter is it's really hard to have one voice when you've got 700 different trade associations speaking for you.
Exactly. Yeah. It would be great if we could just kind of make a unified message that everybody agrees on and then go with it.
We've tried, but we've tried, but so.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. I love talking to you. You're welcome back anytime. And really this conversation is a testament to how important strategic planning is in agriculture, no matter where you are in agriculture.
Yep. Thank you, Chrissy.
Yes, thank you. And to our listeners, if you'd like to learn more, check the links in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to North American Ag Spotlight on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Listen Notes, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you prefer video, we're on Rumble and Telegram as well. And if you found the episode helpful, please share it with your network. Have a great day.